Hi, my name is Nina Means, Director for Austin Community College Fashion Incubator, and we are here for ACCFI Presents. We are really excited to introduce you to one of our local designers, Andie Day of Mary Claret. Her brand is one that has, been shown in a variety of places. She's been at Magnolia Market in Waco. She has a beautiful website, and we're so excited to have her as a part of the first cohort of the ACC Fashion Incubator Designer-in-Residence program. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to get to know Andie a little bit more, get a chance to hear more about her brand, but really, talking through some of the experiences that Andie has had, during the pandemic and ways that she's found ways to create value for her brand, and looking at other things that she's, wanting to see for the future as we're coming on the other side of this. So, Andie, welcome to ACCFI Presents.
Hi, Nina. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you about Mary Claret and about what we're doing in the incubator.
Excellent. We want to introduce your brand, Mary Claret, to our audience. And so could you tell me a little bit about your brand? And while you're doing that, I'm actually going to share, your website because it's so beautiful.
Sure. Yeah, and it always helps to be able to see the product when I talk about it a little bit. So, yeah, let me tell you a little bit about Mary Claret. So, I design women's contemporary apparel. I design all clothing made of linen, cotton, and silk. And I pre-wash all the fabrics when the garments are sewn so that everything is like pre-shrunk and the customer knows exactly how it's going to fit. As a designer, I love texture. So what you notice about my clothing is everything has this really kind of soft, subtle texture to it, and that is created from the type of fabric I use. I primarily design with yarn dyed linen, and so you'll see like in that blue hoodie on the left, the like soft kind of texture to it, and that's the two different tones that create that yarn dye.
It's
So it's
beautiful.
Thanks. It's like a really subtle way of making color a little bit more interesting so that the silhouette's really simple, but then there's a little bit of added texture through that. So yeah, I love texture, and you can see that kind of style used throughout a lot of my garments. I think my garments are feminine and also really forgiving. A lot of people think of when I say I design with linen, people assume like these really big, oversized, like billowy pants and stuff like that. And I designed my silhouettes to be like a little bit like semi-tailored so that they are flattering. They provide like a lot of extra room in the stomach and the thighs and the chest, but they're not so oversized that they're just, big boxes and they don't show a woman's shape. So these at the bottom are my wrap skirts, which are designed that same way. They have like a really nice fitted waist to accentuate the waist, and then they're nice and full throughout the hips to allow like comfort and room. And also, you can obviously make them bigger or smaller depending on how you're feeling that day, which is the beauty of a wrap skirt and the way that it's
That's
expandable.
great.
Yeah, and yeah, so that's kind of a little bit about my clothing. It's a small collection, and I slowly add new pieces to it. Um, but yeah, it's it's been a cool process, and my a lot of my products have been designed based on customers asking me like, "Do you have this? Do you have this? Are you going to add this?" And when I hear that frequently enough, I'm like, "Okay, it's time. It's time to add pants." So yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm this first of all, I love your product photography. I love the wrap skirts, and I love the changeability of the sizing. Because you're right, some days you're going to want a little bit more room, and other days, you may want to be able to tie it a little bit tighter. But these are really, really beautiful, and I love the yarn dye quality. That texture is really something special. So,
Thanks.
can you tell me a little? Go ahead.
Okay.
Can you tell me a little bit about how your brand got started? Because this is such a beautiful collection. I'm just curious, what led you to Mary Claret as a brand name, as a point of view? Where did it all come from?
Sure, yeah. So I studied for my undergrad. I studied fashion design at Baylor, but I actually, when I was in college, was really interested in film and costume design. So I actually started my career in the film industry. Worked in Dallas on several TV shows as a costumer, and did a lot of.
Wow.
Oh, sorry, what?
I just said, wow, that's incredible.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's where I started, and so I have spent probably more time in the mall than anyone else because on a couple of shows, my position was a buyer, and I bought clothes for our characters all day, every day. And so I got to know like retail stores really well, and I got to know product fit really well, and I got to know all the different brands really well because I bought so much stuff. So I love retail. I always have, and that made me love it even more because I love to see the way that products are displayed and how companies choose to buy what they buy. So I started out as in the film industry and actually moved to Austin to get my master's in costume design at UT Austin. So I have an undergraduate degree in fashion design, a master's of fine arts in costume design. Assumed that I was probably going to keep pursuing costume design. Um, and but while I was at UT, I became a little bit more interested in entrepreneurship and chose to take a class in McCombs. I'm like this kid in the MFA program, the theater program, and I'm with like all these MBA students. It was really intimidating, but yeah, it was like, so what the class was a new venture creation class, and at the beginning of the class, you pitched an idea, and then students formed groups based on the idea that interested them. So I pitched the idea, not Mary Claret, it's another idea, which is related, is an idea about women's custom suiting. You're probably pretty
Oh,
familiar with like Indochino, Black
yes.
Lapel, Brooks Brothers trying to do it. There's a million options
Yes.
there for men's custom suiting, and there's not really much in the way of women's wear. So that was the idea, was this professional suiting women's concept, and I got this group of MBA students to research it with me. Me and another student ended up researching it a little further to see if we were going to maybe try to make it happen, and ended up deciding not to. But at the same time, I had become pretty interested in production. In my last semesters at UT, I just started having clothing produced just out of curiosity. It was like, I'm going to try this idea and see like if it'll work. Something like a suiting was so much more complex than like a garment with no lining. So I started having just started Mary Claret as just as a research project for fun for myself, and really enjoyed doing it and have continued to do it since. It's interesting too. The idea of fit comes back to that same situation. A lot of my designs have a lot to do with fit. I think fit is a problem we have in the industry that people are working to solve in various ways. My cuts are one way that I solve it, but that was a problem I assessed then, and I still think it's a problem now. And that's kind of why that's why I design the way I do. You asked about the name. So the
Yes,
name,
I'm curious.
yeah, right. Because everyone's like, "Oh, hi, Mary," and I'm like, "My name's Andie," but that's totally fine. My school is Mary Claret, like that. We're one and the same. So, was in costuming. So I'm as a designer. We get our satisfaction from seeing the finished product, right? Not from being the product or being seen, right? Like think of all the designers that like walk out on like like on the runway and they're like, okay, right? Like they're like,
Right. There's a humble back away. They're like, I'm done
right,
here.
right. They're just like,
I'm not the
oh,
model. Yes.
right. Like I don't want to be seen. So I'm like that. Watching somebody try on my clothes or seeing someone wear them, that's like where I get my satisfaction. And so I needed a persona that maybe could be like a real girl's name, but also had a little meaning to it. So what it comes from is there's a patron saint. There's many patron saints related to clothing, but there's a patron saint named Anthony Mary Claret in Catholicism. He's a patron saint of textiles. And so
Oh,
fabrics are a huge part of where my products come from, or my designs come from, is the texture that I talked about and how much I love fabric. And that's where the name came from. But I shortened it and feminized it.
fantastic.
So she is kind of, Mary Claret is kind of the muse of the brand, even though she's not a real person. She's kind of the customer I think about designing for, and people therefore think she is me. So
I love that. I actually really love that. It has such a rich meaning. I think, it's not even something that's necessarily completely obvious whenever you look at it, but you're right. It sounds like someone that
mhm,
you'd like to get to know. And so whenever you see, we see your face, we're like, is it you? Is it,
yeah,
we'd love to get to know you. But now Mary Claret is this, kind of this ideal,
right.
can you tell me a little bit about kind of just because I'm curious, can you tell me a little bit more about like the personality of the brand? Because we saw the beautiful imagery and that fit that's just so easy and has just that body skin. Tell me a little bit more about like what is she like? Like what's the customer like a bit? Because I'm a little curious.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And where that's kind of what we're going through right now in the incubator is our target customer and trying to really understand them. And so I've been thinking more about that, about who she is, but also this idealized version of this maybe Mary Claret and who she might be. I think in terms of the way that my products come out to design for this person, this customer, they end up being a mix of like very feminine pieces like the wrap skirts that have this really traditional feminine quality to them that I cannot tell you the number of women who have been in various age ranges who said, my mom used to make wrap skirts for me, or like, I used to make wrap skirts for my daughters. And so there's this like really interesting heritage component of it, that a really simple style like that's been, people have made wrap skirts, like you can find them in every store, but it's the particular style of mine that have the really traditional A-line, the curved hem that create a feminine quality to them that's really different than the more professional squared off corner, more straight up and down silhouette wrap skirt that you see compared to what mine are. And so I think it's through these really small details of curves that I put into the garments, like a curve of a hem, the shape of that corner on the wrap skirt, that add this like ever so slight feminine detail to the clothing, that I think is attracting a customer in a way that that they feel the shapes and even just those small subtle curves are really flattering for them. When people put on the wrap skirts, what I've talked to you before about what has been really helpful for me as like a small business is we have a lot of opportunities in Austin, like the different makers markets, and I've sold a lot at like in-person events. And what that has done for me, although that's just like one component of being able to make this brand sustainable and long lasting and profitable, what it's done is really gotten me to have the opportunity to talk to customers one-on-one so much, which a lot of online starting brands don't have that ability to do. And the look that you see in someone's eyes when they put the wrap skirt on, and like I always convince people, like I'm like, just try it on over your clothes. It's just try it on. And people will try them on because what's the harm? You just put it on over your clothes. And the look that they have in their eye when they see themselves in it is such a cool thing as a designer. You'll see them like start to spin and move and see kind of like the softness of it. And that is something that is inspiring to me, is seeing the way that they respond to themselves when they see them and themselves in the clothes.
I love that because it's really so much about the customer. It's really about how they feel in it, and I love the discovery that you've had in your selling moments. I remember we had talked, about the different markets and different places you've shown up and the kinds of conversations you were able to have. Um, I remember just because I love Fixer Upper, you had actually gotten a chance to show your work at in Magnolia as well, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
it's the silos.
Yeah, Magnolia does events like several times a year. They do like these big pop-up markets that are really well produced and like beautifully done. And what was so cool about those is my in Austin I get all the makers markets here. I know the Austin customer really well, but that Magnolia customer is like a customer from across the country. People come from Alaska to Waco, Texas to see Magnolia, and getting
Wow.
to show my product to such a broad customer range was really valuable, and just getting it in front of a bunch of customers from across the country that I wouldn't have had access to otherwise is really helpful. And seeing that like this I'm wearing, you can hardly see it, but I'm wearing one of my hoodies, and these I design, they're like just kind of like a really simple, slightly tapered at the waist, like linen garment with like a little detail of like a pocket, and I carry them in size extra small through 2X. And the number of women that would be like, I just can't wear like that. It's not going to work. It's not going to like, it's not going to look good on me. I'm like, just try it on. And they would put it on and it looks cute on literally everyone. If it's
Wow.
anybody's chest size, it's like I'm sounding like I'm bragging, but I'm always
No, you
amazed.
tell us.
it looks cute on everybody. So it was neat to get to see such a broad range of customer at those events that didn't help inspire me for future designs based on the stuff that they talked to me about.
Absolutely. We love that. And I love that people are finding you and really in these places where you're like, oh, it's, there's some places where you're like, oh, it seems like it'd be like hyper local, but there are other places where it's really bringing a much wider audience to introduce your brand across the country, which is really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
This year has been really, for in-person events, it's trailed off quite a bit because of the pandemic. And I think for designers, our industry, just our day-to-day lifestyle, it's really introduced a lot of challenges, how have things changed for you during the pandemic and, what things have been challenging, what things have actually gone really well for you?
Yeah, I think that I'm lucky in that my product was already a semi-casual product. Like people wear my product to work. I've had a lot of women that are like teachers that buy the wrap skirts because they can move in them really easily. And teachers are like up on their feet, like helping a kid at their desk. So I've always had my product was already pretty well established for the market of casual living. I didn't have to like redesign from a different product sector. So that I think I was lucky in, that it was already fitting for this new market. I did early on, was because I do most of my product development myself, which is why the incubator is really helpful for me because we have all the Gerber technology access, which I can work with really well. I do most of my product development myself. So early on, I was able to sew masks like super quick and before they were like really available on the market and used a lot of materials I already had. Like I use bias trim for the edges of my shorts and for like this right here, this is a bias. And I was able to
Mm-hmm.
use materials I already had to create masks to like get out to people as fast as I could. I ended up donating a lot of that money that I sold with masks to Austin Creative Alliance. They have a artist relief fund, and being from working in the
Wow.
film industry, there was nothing that was happening in the film industry, and most of those people were unemployed. So it was a group that I knew they could use the work. It was for like artists that had lost wages. So I was able to give
Wow.
some of the money away, but was also able to use up a lot of material that I was likely just going to be sitting on because factories weren't really
Mm-hmm.
working. I sewed like a ton of masks myself, but that was something that I did that was just like quick, scrappy, adaptable. And then since I've also like have started selling fabric too, this is like it's still related to Mary Claret. I still do it under the umbrella of Mary Claret, but um, it's it's similar in some ways. In that I've always been educational with my customer about like this is why this fabric weight is good for a skirt. It's going to look slimming on your hips and it's going to like fall nicely. This is why this is good for a top. But in the same sense, I'm that way with educating people about fabric. People can be like, oh, is this a good weight for curtains? Or is this a good weight for a top? And I like import these really beautiful linens and have been selling fabric too, because there's been a big increase in people doing DIY kind of projects and stuff like that. So something I didn't expect to be doing. I don't know how much that will actually exist in my continued business. I think about that right now as we're doing a lot of customer analysis with the incubator. Is I have my clothing customer, and now I have this fabric customer too that are probably not the same person, or maybe they are. But I've been able to adapt well to the circumstances. I think I've always felt that I was fairly scrappy with my business and was able to kind of solve problems inexpensively. And I think that has been some examples of how I've been able to kind of work with the situation of COVID.
Wow. Andie. Andie. Let me just tell you, first of all, I love that you and your brand represent, I think, what's good about the world in terms of finding ways to support our community in an authentic way, using what's in our hand to help those that we know are in need. And so, thank you. Thank you, first of all, for stepping up quickly to support, our design community. It's a big deal.
Thanks. Yeah, it was something
Um,
I could help with in like a small way. So thanks.
No, we really appreciate it. I think I see that as brands are growing, a lot of brands are thinking, okay, how do I drive value? How do I keep my doors open? What do I do? And, one of the things that I appreciate is that you are like an authentic creator. Like you make the product, your hands are on the product, you understand how to use the technology, you're expanding your use of the technology, and we can't wait to take that further with the Gerber
Mm.
technology equipment that we have at the incubator, to automate some of those processes and get you set up with some of the manufacturers to expand your reach that much further. But we are really seeing so many brands that have been kind of shifting into face coverings and things like that. But you're the only one that I know of that's really shifted into also selling material as well, which I think is actually really cool. It's a really great way to create another entry point, another opportunity. Because you're right, everyone's at home making their own mask, designing their own mask, or purchasing them from someone who's doing it for them. It's a little bit more. We have time on our hands in a way that we haven't had before.
It's
Um,
there's always been a lack of. I know you were a design student in New York, and you probably experienced the lack of ability to find. Well, in New York, you have a lot better access to it, but across the U.S., there is just all we have anymore is Joann's Fabrics, right? There is no smaller fabric retailers anymore, and people just don't have access to fabric, and so there is a need for that I didn't expect to be filling, but it's something that is a problem that students deal with, that people that want to make their own clothes or stuff want to deal with, and I enjoy helping with that because I'm a maker too. So that's been just an interesting thing to add that I didn't expect to be doing.
Absolutely. I think that there's definitely, now that we're kind of seeing that that's an opportunity in the market, maybe it is an entry point. Maybe it is another, division of Mary Claret. Who knows? But it's a really great opportunity to, this part of the going through the pandemic, I think it's really tested our resolve to find opportunities to fill white space, to fill what's missing in the market. And you nailed it right on the head. You're right. Like even as a fashion student, there are certain places in New York that you can't purchase from because it's like wholesale only, or
Right.
they're very, very, very expensive for really beautiful things, but it's $50 a yard. And as a student, you're not,
Right.
always in the market for that. Right. So, but I think having other options, I think it's the key for makers is having options and to have beautiful options like the materials that you purchase. The linens are just gorgeous. They're really nice. Um, so, as we're getting into, got a few more minutes here, as we're looking at kind of what your vision is for your brand and where you'd like to see things go, what does that look like for you? And what would you like to see happen with Mary Claret?
Sure. So I'm excited to be part of the incubator because I know I have so much to learn. I do some things well and I do some things I could use so much like guidance, education, and growth on. And some of the stuff that I really intend to work on, or the goals I have for the brand, are um, I really over the time I've contemplated what kind of brand this will be ultimately, and I really do see it as a small batch, Austin-based clothing brand. So I ultimately would love to have my own product development and sewing studio factory in Austin, employ local people, and do everything fully in house. You just have so much more control with what you do with like your fabric waste in that sense. And I do have an intent to be a sustainable brand in terms of materials I use and what I do with the fabric, what I do with the excess fabric. Um, Currently, I really would like to continue working on marketing my product, and just growing my customer base. I know that I have a quality product. I know I have a product that customers want and enjoy and like. But as a small business, just I'm here to learn. That's why I'm in the incubator. I could use growth in marketing to my customer, sourcing and product development and production. And so being able to better get new products to customers more frequently, always keep them engaged with what's coming out are some goals that I have for my brand.
That's great. We are really excited to have you. Let me just tell you, Andie is she, you know, we're talking to Andie as the designer, creative director, and owner of Mary Claret today, but Andie is also a professor at Baylor for the fashion design program there, and she educates so many people on textiles and fit and garment construction. And so we're really, happy to have um, your expertise with us as well, but we are excited to bring that fashion entrepreneurship, fashion business, information that you're looking for to you. And so we're really, as we're looking at, the kinds of brands that we are excited to support, Mary Claret is definitely at the top of our list. We love the aesthetic, the attitude, the customer, the designer. You really added so much value already, not just to the program, but really for your customer at large. So we can't wait to get you in front of more people to love these beautiful creations and expand that product assortment. We've got a couple of minutes here, and I want to kind of give people a bit more information about our program. But before I do that, I just want to say, Andie, thank you so much for joining us here for ACCFI Presents.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was really fun to talk about my brand. So thanks, Nina.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Andie and I also have spoken together on a panel at South by Southwest a couple of years ago. And so I got a chance to meet Andie and work with Andie in a different capacity, before, us coming into this space. And Andie also was the winner of the Austin Fast Start competition for fashion. It was a pitching competition held by the Austin Young Chamber of Commerce, and Andie won that competition. And so we were able to offer her incubation here at the Fashion Incubator, courtesy of the city of Austin. So we're so glad that we were able to, kind of bring all of that full circle, and to be able to have that experience here with you. But she is a true star, and her brand, I think, has a very, very long runway. So again, thanks so much. What we're going to do is just give you a quick, update on some of the things that are going on here at the Fashion Incubator. We are so happy that you're able to join us here for ACCFI Presents. But we will also be on, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays again in our normal circulation for Coffee Talk, Workshop Wednesdays, and for ACCFI Presents next Friday. So what we'll be doing is we'll actually be going to a pre-recorded format. So we won't be doing our normal dialogue that we, would love to encourage, but it will be posted live. So if you have any questions, we'll be responding to those comments on the YouTube channel. So definitely subscribe. We'll get a chance to get a notification of that whenever it goes up. But we will be watching those comments very closely. So if you have any questions about any of the content you're checking out, we'll be quick to reply in that space. We do have a couple of programs that are kind of en route right now. We had launched the Macy's Future Fashion course that is now in its third week. And so that course has closed for participation. However, we will be launching it again sometime next year. So follow us at ACC Fashion Incubator on all of our social media handles at LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can also sign up for our email list at fashion.incubator@austincc.edu. So you can keep up with all of the great, exciting programs that we have here at the Incubator. Again, guys, this has been a wonderful time with you today. We have enjoyed so much our time with Mary Claret, the brand, and the designer, Andie Day. And we are going to catch you sometime next week. So thanks again. And this has been ACCFI Presents.